Yo, what's going on, you guys? So here is my basic guide on how to get better at Valorant. Now, I tried to record this video 2 times and they were both about 30 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep this one short. I have about 5,000 hours in all the Counter-Strike games combined, so I'm not the best Counter-Strike player in the world, but I can give you the tips to start playing better and start winning more games. Alright, so the first thing we want to go over is settings. Now, general settings, the only thing I changed was sensitivity aim. I made this a little bit lower, it was too high. Now let's go into controls. I changed jump to mouse wheel down because it's a lot easier to bunny hop and just maneuver around the map. So if this is helpful to you, go ahead and change it. Spacebar is fine if you don't mind not bunny hopping. Anyways, let's go to equipment. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. I have 1 through 4 for my weapons and the spike, kind of like Counter-Strike. Drop weapon and use and plant are the same key. Now my abilities are Z, X, V, and H. The reason for that is I can quickly move my fingers off WASD to Z, V, X, H, and I can do that pretty quickly. I can do it while running around. The reason I don't use C is because I use C to communicate with team. Now, I don't really use ping or anything like that, but in interface, I have not changed anything either. Now, let's move on to crosshair. Now, crosshair, this is pretty much up to you. I like to use a little dot. I'll go over this real quick if you want to pause the video and take a look at my settings if you want to copy it. Now we'll move on to video settings. Now this is very important. Resolution, pretty much up to you, but really the thing you want to think about is what resolution do I play shooters best with, and also where do I get the highest frame rates, right? Like if you have an older video card, you might want to go with the 4:3 stretched, kind of like I do. I'm just used to this from Counter-Strike. Another thing you want to check is limit FPS. Always you want that off, because the more FPS you have, the better chance that you have the max refresh rate at all times. Now refresh rate is based on your monitor, so it might be only 60 Hertz, which means you can see 60 frames. For me it's 144, so I can see 144 frames. Or you might have a really nice monitor and you can see up to 240 Hertz or more. Now my golden rule is to try and have at least 40 FPS above your max refresh rate at all times. You can see in the top left I'm about at 200, which is good for me, as my refresh rate is only 144. Now that we've gone through settings, let's move on to some basic game mechanics. Now there are 2, maybe 3 rules for crosshair placement. I would say for almost every single gun in the game except for SMGs and snipers sometimes, which is going to be one of the other rules, you're going to be aiming at the head the entire time. The reason for that is you do more damage when you get a headshot, so it's more likely that you're going to win a fight if you're aiming at the head. Now you do want to aim at the body if you know the enemy is weak, you're spraying through a wall, or you're spraying through a smoke. Now the second rule is with snipers, pretty much you want to aim at the body more often than head with the operator, because the operator doesn't really have any benefit for a headshot. As you can see, body does 150, so it's going to be an instant kill. This does say it blocks 50% of damage taken, but I swear I've gotten one shots with operator in the body plenty of times. I don't really know too many details on that. Obviously you can see leg shots do 127. Martial is kind of that in-between special category where if you know your teammate has hit the enemy, you can go for a body shot. Otherwise you're going to be shooting at the head. But those are the 2 rules for crosshair placement. Basically just aim at the head no matter what. Especially on pistol round, this is the most important. Pistols are very accurate and you have very little shots, but if you do aim at the head, you're going to win the pistol fight. And that's one of the things that shows how good a player is how good they are with pistols, because really the only thing you do with the pistol is aim at the head. Now talking about economy, you can buy any weapon for your allies. And going on into economy, basically you can buy any weapon for your allies. You can't buy armor for them and you can't buy abilities for them. But what this means is you need to be checking how much money people have and how much money your team has as a whole. Some common mistakes about economy is that people will have 5,000 money and they'll spend 4,500 on a sniper and then buy a light shield, while their team has about 2,000 each. The problem with that is that you guys might have to eco another round because of this careless buy. So it's always worth checking the economy for that. And now on the flip side, let's say you only have 2,000 money, everyone else has about 4,000, and there's a guy with 8,000. Now you need to communicate on mic with the guy that has 8,000 and tell him to buy you a gun. And he'll probably be glad to buy you a gun. One common mistake I see with newer players in this game and in Counter-Strike is that they don't realize that the money is basically all pulled together. So don't be afraid to ask for a weapon if you don't have enough to afford it and you're trying to get armor as well. And another tip about economy, if you only have 3,000 for example, don't go and buy a Vandal, right? You want to request a Vandal so you can buy armor as well and maybe some abilities. Don't be afraid to have people spend money for you. Now that we've talked about economy and crosshair placement in this game, I will tell you that if you go to the shooting range, you can practice your aim on these bots here. And real quick, let's talk about weapons. Now, I do recommend that you look at how much damage these weapons do, what kind of wall penetrations they have. Basically, high wall penetration is only going to be useful once you've mastered a map. I would recommend using the Vandal, maybe the Operator if you enjoy sniping, but really stick with the Vandal. It's probably the best weapon overall in the whole game. And quickly, its spray pattern is basically a 7. And then to combat that, you just hold down and then left and then right and then left. So it'll go back and forth. And that's how you can combat that. And one of the rules to spraying is that basically you're only going to be spraying through walls, through smoke, or if there's multiple enemies. So now let's move on to how to play on maps in general. And quickly, before we go into maps, if you want to learn more about weapons, there are tons of videos out there with all the spray patterns of all the weapons in Valorant, so go check those out on YouTube if you're curious, but I will say that the majority of them are similar to a 7 recoil pattern. Now let's move on to maps. Now the cool thing about Valorant is you get to choose your spawn point per se. All these little blue barriers on the minimap represent where you can spawn basically. Usually these spawns are right next to choke points, as like right when I come out there's a choke point right here and people are going to show up. So the first thing to learn these maps is learn where all the spawn points per se are, and then find out where you can expect enemies. And then after you do that, eventually you're going to get a sense of like how long it takes them to show up, and that's called game sense. So that's something you're going to develop over time. But knowing how long which side has advantage. For example, in the spot we were just at, the people on this side have a disadvantage, and I know that because if you start over there, you can get to those boxes very quickly compared to how long it takes these people to get from here to here. The exception to that is if someone is playing Jett, because Jett does have like a little boost where she'll go really fast and she'll be here pretty much by the time the person runs to that box. So she'll be actually way down here before they even realize it. So getting a sense of how long it takes for people depending on the spawn points is going to take some time. And now let's move on to some of the other tips on playing on maps in general. Now that we talked about spawn points, let's talk about some other general things about playing on these maps. So in Valorant, what I've noticed is there are a lot of little corners hidden everywhere. So if you want to be good at Valorant, whenever you're coming out of a place, let's say I'm coming out of A short, you need to check every corner because the walls are not going to have players sticking out for the most part. There's very few spots that aren't able to hide a full player. There's a few, like even this spot right here, they can't see me. There's very few spots where they're going to be able to see you if you're hiding around the corner. And there's tons of them on all the maps in Valorant. So one of the things I'm going to say right now is check all your corners no matter how close they are. That's one of the big things I see when I get into games. People are not checking their corners. I pick up a bunch of easy kills, and I can repeatedly just go to like a little spot and they're not going to notice. And that is going to lead me into my next point, which is pretty obvious, but it is to walk around. So walking around has a bunch of benefits. One of them is that you don't give information to the enemy team of where you're at. So this can result in like 3 kills at once. So like let's say they're walking to bomb site C and then I just mow them down right there. Or even if it's a 1v1 situation, they're planting, they don't hear me walking up, and that's an easy win round for me. Another benefit of walking around is usually if an enemy is camping a corner like this, there's 2 places for them to watch, right? There's here and here. if you're walking around the corner, at least a 50% chance they're watching the other side, and that your reaction time is going to be a lot faster if you're just aiming at the wall, ready to shoot them if they're hiding there, right? So even if they're aiming here, they could be looking left. In general, they're not going to be checking both, right? They might hear you over here, so you know they're going to be looking here and you're probably going to lose. But if they don't know where the enemy is, they're going to have to check both sides in case they're walking. And that's one of the benefits of walking. It just makes you a better player, so make sure to walk around more. Another thing that I'll note really quickly that you're going to learn over time is how far away people can hear you when you're running. Let's say people are on bomb site B, they're not going to hear me running here. But maybe once I'm around here, they'll start hearing me. So you have to be wary of how far away they can hear you. Alright, now we're going to move on to some of the more technical things when playing on maps in general. And the first thing I'm going to say is shooting through walls or wall bang. You have to know the penetration of the guns. Now some of them are high. The SMGs I think are high penetration and the operator is high penetration. The rifles are medium, which means you can shoot through wood. These black dots on the wall, that means you did penetrate the wall. For example, this one can be penetrated but only by the operator. But a lot of other things like boxes and whatnot can be penetrated. Maps have some quirks. For example, this door has health, and once I break it, I can actually wall bang it even with this rifle. Now the operator can actually shoot through these doors anyways, but for example, there are weird quirks on maps like this, and you just kind of have to fool around with the maps and figure out everything about them to get really good at the game. Now moving into the most difficult thing that's going to take a lot of time to learn, even for us more experienced players, is how your abilities can interact with your allies. Now one thing that's going to be really important to learn on maps is self-boost spots. So one person that can self-boost is Jet. As you can see in this clip, I can kind of see over the ceiling there. I saw him. And in this clip, you can see that the purple guy, he actually teleported on top of the boxes that his ally made, which you can see my ally shooting here. And he actually killed me in this clip, and I couldn't really see it, but you can see in the top left, he's actually sniping on top of those boxes there. So there's going to be a lot of self-boosting and ally boosting, I guess you could say, in Valorant, and you have to be wary of that. And that kind of thing is going to take some time because a lot of people are going to discover stuff. There could be triple boosts. There's a lot of interactions to be discovered between allies and whatnot. So that's kind of the most advanced part about learning Valorant. But definitely what I provided so far is going to help you increase your skill level. But let's quickly go over the things that I talked about and summarize it up for you guys. So the first thing is make sure your settings are good. Make sure you're getting high FPS. And make sure your abilities are easier to use. Economy, watch the economy. You don't want to make a big mistake and have to eco twice and make your team suffer. Tip number 3, study the maps. See where people are spawning. Know when to expect enemies, like have an internal sense of how long it takes enemies to show up after the round starts, where you're going to fight enemies once you run out. Next, don't be afraid to shoot through thin walls if you have a rifle, and the operator can actually get away with a lot more. So if you do have the operator, feel free to shoot through bigger walls that you wouldn't normally be able to shoot through. Next, remember to walk around. It doesn't give your enemies information, and it allows you to sneak up on enemies and make some big plays. Finally, get used to using your abilities, as there's going to be self boosts and interactions with your allies, and the abilities can help bring out your playstyle overall, whether you're more of a passive camper or whether you like to run in first and try to get something started for your team. But anyways, guys, I hope this basic guide during Valorant beta, so this guide might not be great later on, but for Valorant beta, I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial. Make sure to leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, comment down below what you guys think, and are you excited for when Valorant is finally released? Let me know. But anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Peace.